Hello, all. I prepared the next 12 days is Speaking Hell. I'm going to be with Brian Greene on stage at the Smithsonian in a week, and I'm back up here in Santa Clara for another conference on the 21st. So I got into PowerPoint hell here, and I think maybe I should have had no PowerPoint at all, because the topic here is one with which I'm pretty familiar, and that perhaps I should blaze through a few of these points and really throw it open to you, because it sounds like it's a very erudite, not a very large audience, but a very erudite one and very focused. So I'll try my best to get to the meat of the matter, which includes what some of you said about what is transparency and what is achievable as far as privacy is concerned. So let me just move along. This is a quotation by a friend of mine that I think really should be added to our list of aphorisms. Those who ignore the mistakes of the future are bound to make them. And this is, of course, what I live my life by, both as a scientist and as a science fiction author, and now this stupid public speaking thing, that we need to engage these prefrontal lobes, the little nubs above our eyes, that are, to make a reference to the Bible, the lamps on our brow that let us peer ahead and try to discover, oh, there's a familiar face, to discover errors before they happen. Because otherwise we will be one more failed species in this galaxy, and the evidence seems to suggest. I was sitting next to Jill Tarter last night at a screening of Contact, and we were answering questions from the audience together. I've done a lot on SETI, and the question of whether or not there are basic mistakes that all civilizations make that we might either be the first to avoid or one of the rare ones to avoid, or simply fall into them just like everybody else. Now, that's the issue that faces us. We have this great big planet, and we have a choice between whether we're going to turn it into Soylent Green or become true planetary managers who can maybe be worthy of then helping other species on this planet. So what have we been up to? We've been reinventing ourselves again and again and again, and each generation thinks it's very special. And we're trying to get to the point where we can have Star Trek, and that depends on what may be an illusion if you're a cynic, is civilization of progression. Well, some of you recognize Steve Mann in the upper left. He's the original cyborg, and you can see the progression of the goggles that pretty much he invented, and now some of the companies are trying to bring online. You recognize a face in the lower left using Google Glass. And in the lower right corner, you have my representation of a semi-pro news reporter in my novel Existence. Her name is Tor Pavlov, and she has mobile gel cams that move around like antennas and will point in all directions. She's walking down the street, camera on the corner of her glasses, scans everyone's faces. They look them up in face registries, and you get name tags under everyone who's walking by. You're never at a loss for who you're facing ever again, including your Farley file of the most important things that you remember about them. So you're never embarrassed again. Unless you want to be, in which case you click your teeth or do whatever you want, and instead of a name tag or their own preening public persona, you get dissenting opinions from their ex-spouses. Well, I'm going to be asking you what that means. What kind of a world have you entered if you're in that kind of a world? And there's a very simple answer to that. Now, we've had, ever since I got into this biz, and I have been arguing with my friends in EFF and Computers, Freedom, and Privacy ever since about 1994. And that led to the creation of my book, The Transparent Society, which is one of the only public policy books from the 20th century still selling more every year, still in print. And one of the points I made then, I predicted, that you would have no end to the number of surprise leaks. And this last year we had Target and Heartbleed, as if that wasn't enough. You want to go down a list? I think you would not be worth your pay if you could not come up with 2 major leaks per year going back all the way back to 1994. And every single time, the swears and vows and all of that this ain't going to happen again. We got it sussed, we got it fixed. And nobody seems to be saying the basic lesson, and that is that stuff leaks, especially when the stuff costs nothing to copy. And especially when you have a civilization in which Assange is supposed to be in there on the, I guess he did get some privacy behind Heartbleed. Especially when you have a civilization in which the penalties are small and the rewards, especially for egotistical young bachelors, can outweigh the punishments. Now, poor Chelsea Manning there, of course, that's not going to be the case. But Snowden and Assange are public figures, which is what they wanted, conceiving of themselves as being Don Quixote, tilting at windmills, and we could spend an hour decrypting them. And whichever side of the political spectrum you're on, you're oversimplifying them because they're actually vastly more interesting and more complicated than whatever side you've taken on this issue. My point is that only transparency will empower us to ride this wave because our society, and only ours, benefits from any secular trend toward a world that's filled with light. Now, this slide was basically intended, I'm going back east to Washington, D.C. next week, and this slide was basically intended to people back there. Because when I talk to government agencies, and fortunately we're a member of a civilization that likes science fiction authors to come in and berate them about things that they have not thought about, the usual tradition in the military and protector caste in most civilizations is if you won the last war, you plan for the last war because you're comfortable with it. If you lost the last war, you plan for the next one. And that is how villains have managed to get a head start on the civilized nations in many of the last wars, but it didn't happen since World War II. Why? A fellow by the name of George Marshall said, we're going to promote only people who are worrywarts and who worry about the next war, not the last war. Now, some of you may not like this talk of the professional protector caste, but they exist. They're very well funded. And the last 70 years of the greatest peace the world has ever seen, growing more and more peaceful with every year, despite Iraq and Afghanistan and all the terrible things that our news media focus our attention to, rightfully so, because it is because our attention has been spread to these failures of peace and failures of prosperity that in fact prosperity and peace have expanded as fast as they have. But my main point in the lower left is this. If the world continues to spread light, which is the core central word of enlightenment, then many, many groups and factions will suffer. The fundamental point is that the only ones who really suffer are those who are our foes. Now, many of you don't like that business, us, foes, us, win, and all of that. Sorry. But given a choice between, say, Sharia law or the New Confederacy, there, I pointed arrows in both directions, and a civilization in which you are free to throw things at David Brin for having made it a matter of black and white, I think you choose the civilization in which you are welcome to start throwing things at me at any moment. As if you get that fundamental, then there is a fundamental that I tell them back in DC, and that is all of our enemies Those who would wish us physical and civilization harm as opposed to rivals like Japan. Those who would actually wish us harm and the collapse of our civilization and the re-enslavement of our women and all those other bad things are generally lethally allergic to light. If they have schemes, light falls upon them, the schemes wither. Now, do we have such enemies within our own civilization? Of course, they're rooted in human nature, because cheating is inherent in human nature. We're all descended from the harems of brutal guys who picked up metal implements and created pyramidal-shaped social structures in which a few lords were able to take everyone else's sons and daughters and their wheat. We're all descended from the harems of those guys, and we all share the will, when we get power, to cheat. Some resist it. Some great leaders. A large fraction of women leaders, for example. I love what happened in Iceland. The men all came off the fishing boats and founded banks and said, we have a banker gene, and leveraged the company to hell and made lots and lots and lots of money until the bubble burst. Do you know what happened in Iceland? The women basically took over. I think there are only 3 or 4 men in the entire government. And they said, back to the boats. And I can think of worse things to happen to us. All right, look, what are we going to be doing? We're going to be reconfiguring genes. We're going to be changing our own babies. We're going to be uplifting other animals. And meddling in their genes. Where does this all lead? It seems that there's really basically 2 choices. I showed you Soylent Green. Jared Diamond has this book, which I urge everybody to read. It's a fantastic cautionary tale, except for his lack of any intelligent recommendations. The same is true of the opposite extreme. You have a lot of them here in this valley, of people who are obsessed with something called the singularity. The notion that we'll all become gods within 30 years. If you're Ray Kurzweil and in your 70s, it's 10 years. If you're some of the young whippersnappers here in this crowd here and you're only about 30, then you know how hard it's going to be. It's going to take 50 years. Funny how the young folks are more realistic. The point is that either way, we need to be poking sticks in the sand in front of us like mad, because it's the only way that you can find mistakes and avoid the quicksand pits, the pitfalls, the punji stakes, the landmines that happen when people who are so full of themselves and their own ideas go charging ahead saying, I know exactly the way to go. Which has happened not only with inventions, but with ideologies. It is the reciprocal accountability of reciprocal criticism that enables us to get past the great quandary of human nature. And what is that great quandary? We are fantastically insightful and imaginative. These prefrontal lobes, these nubs above our eyes, they enable us to project ourselves into the shoes of other people and imagine what might it be like to be that person. And therefore, they are the roots of empathy and some of the most noble spirit that we have, in which progressive people can imagine themselves being in a camp in Sudan and saying, we've got to do something about that, which was not the tendency in past generations. They are also the seat of the Gedanken experiment, the thought experiment, where we imagine what might happen if I present this idea at the meeting, what might happen if I wear this today, what might happen if I try to run this yellow light. And as a result of these thought experiments, very often our answer is, no, don't do that, don't do that. And so we cull a large fraction of the stupid things that we might have done. But do we cull them all? Of course not. One of the great talents and curses of human nature is delusion. And as Richard Feynman said, there is nobody easier to fool than yourself. We get obsessed with our own fabulous concepts, our own fabulous fixations. The things that we know by rote to be true, our indignant self-righteousness, which has been proved to be a physical addiction stronger than heroin, that has poisoned this country. No, don't get me wrong. I know that one end of the political axis is more crazy and dangerous than the other right now. I'd be an idiot not to know that. Waging war on science and all that stuff. But if you cannot recognize the same goggle-eyed, lapel-grabbing thing going on among some of your own friends and allies, then you're not maintaining an agile mind, and you are falling prey to delusion as well. We cannot catch our own delusions. By its very nature, this process makes it hard. By the way, I do very well by delusion. I create incantations of black squiggles, and people pay a lot of money for my books, and they dive into them, and they don't come out. You know what's the best compliment you can give an author? Damn you, I almost lost my job because of you. I almost flunked out because of you. I forgot to feed the cat. I forgot to feed my kids. If you get your readers to say that to you, and I'm pleased to say I do, they'll buy your next book. But the point is that the same trait that enables us to create these incantations and to cast our minds vastly beyond anything we ever knew also enables us to become indignantly wedded to a particular notion. And what is our way around that? How do we find the quicksand pits? It's called reciprocal accountability, reciprocal criticism. Because if you cannot catch your mistakes, someone else is less wedded to them and more likely to catch them. It's one of the great benefits of marriage. Because if you get married, someone will find a fair number, another standard deviation of your mistakes, but not them all. Do you know who is going to find your mistakes for you? You know who finds your mistakes. Your enemies, your competitors. And here is the great irony of human nature. Criticism is the only known antidote to error. Cito Kate. Criticism is the only known antidote to error, and we hate it with a passion. And so we avoid it. And if you are the leader of a pyramidal institution or a pyramidal society, you can evade it with threats, with death. And I have just explained the horrific statecraft of most of our countries in the last 6,000 years. And the reason why our civilization has been so vastly more successful is that we set up an enlightenment in which it is supposedly impossible to evade criticism. And that is the core. That's the core of our enlightenment. Democracy is merely a side effect that is necessary in order for you to get the criticism that spots errors. If we could get that criticism and spot errors and have the reciprocal accountability without democracy, I'd be willing to listen to your plan, but we can't. And that's what got us going. And that is why none of us can be relied upon to say the words, all of my foes need accountability, but I deserve privacy. Because that is what anyone will say. It's what the NSA says. I need privacy in order to do my job and save everybody's lives. I'm not saying no privacy. This is often a calumny said by people who claim that they read the Transparent Society and never cracked the covers. In fact, I can have an entire chapter in there talking about how privacy is one of the main desiderata of human life. We wouldn't be human without some privacy. But if you look at the Constitution of the United States, privacy is never mentioned. It's inferred in a few places. It is very clearly like property, a contingent right that, as Thomas Jefferson said, each generation can redefine. You cannot redefine the freedom to know or the freedom to speak or freedom of association. Those have to be primary rights, uncontingent and pure. Why? Because if they are modified by one generation, it can utterly destroy the next generation's ability to change its mind, to argue over the effects. If our children decide to abandon privacy altogether and walk around naked, some of them, the dissenters, will still have the right to stand on a street corner naked or doing civil disobedience with a loincloth and suffering a couple of days in jail, as is the proper approach. We're holding a sign saying, this is a dumb idea, and persuading their children's generation to maybe let clothes come back. Do you see the distinction? The absolute right has got to be those rights that allow us to discover our mistakes and change our minds. Privacy is important, but here's the deal. A free people will choose to vote themselves some, because they'll want some. What's important is that they be powerful enough and knowing enough to see the parameters and make those arguments with each other and vote for them. And that is why my friend Peter Swire was on the President's Commission, and they came up with a third of the NSA proposals were Potemkin, just gestures. Another third, or maybe even 3/5, were procedures for the professional protector caste, the PPC, to obey and therefore, be more responsible with the information and all that. You can't trust those procedures unless we can supervise. And there were 3 proposals that actually increased accountability slightly. On page 206 of the Transparent Society, it's a creepy page. It has a paragraph in which it says, this was 1997, let's imagine that something really terrible happens, like, say, for instance, terrorists ever bring down both World Trade Center towers. What would the Attorney General then ask for? You remember that. I got emails all over the planet. A lot of you out there are too young to know what that sound means. And by the way, that's one case where I would rather not be right, and yet I still bragged about it. The point is that if you are going to want to maintain your freedom, there are things that work and there are things that don't. And for 20 years, I have heard the same refrain. We can protect freedom and privacy by whining, "Don't look at me," without ever once saying how. How are you going to enforce a law that says, "Don't look at me"? Do you know what Moore's law is? Well, they call it Brin's corollary to Moore's law. The cameras are getting smaller, faster, cheaper, more numerous, and better at a rate faster than Moore's law. In my latest novel, I portray how, kids are buying rolls of stickers. You've seen this, rolls of stickers. They stick them everywhere. Everywhere below this level, in some places, you see stickers. There'll be penny cans. 1 penny, stick it up there, IPv6, good for a year. What are you going to do? And yet Brin said that privacy is important. Even if you pass those laws, the only way you can count on them, the only way they'll work, is if you use the thing that works. And what works? reciprocal accountability. It is less important to hide from the mighty than it is to strip the mighty naked. And that is what worked. That is why you have the freedom you have now. 250 years ago, the Enlightenment started this process of, Adam Smith basically talked about it, prescribed it. Divide the mighty, flatten the playing field, and sick the mighty against each other. Break them up into units small enough so that they hate each other and are at each other's throats. And what the mighty will always try to do is capture government. This is what the Koch brothers are up to. Capture this agency, capture that agency, and then then propagandize that the general concept of government and science are bad, because these are centers that might hold them accountable. It is natural for human elites to try these cheating techniques. Completely natural. They, like me, are descendants of harems, and I can't guarantee you I wouldn't do the same thing, although there are people in this valley who are billionaires who have resisted the temptation and instead taken the Buffett pledge. Right here in this valley. Not all people who get rich or get political power fall prey to this. But it is still about accountability. If we can put a choke chain on the guard dog that we can yank, then it reminds the dog that it's a dog and not a wolf. What benefit do you get from blinding the professional protector caste? A, you won't succeed. B, you've just blinded the people who are protecting you. What that manifests is the zero-sum game. The most horrible human failing is to believe in zero sums, and every civilization but ours believed in them, because life seems to be like that. In order for me to win, I have to make you lose. How many of you know what the zero-sum game is? You know. What is a positive-sum game? It's a game in which I may win a bit more than you by getting rich while making us all richer. And that is theoretically what capitalism is supposed to be. Markets, entrepreneurial markets, when they are flat and Smithian, as in Adam Smith. That's supposed to be what democracy is. Using competition so that we all do better. What's the best of all the positive-sum games? Science. Using opposition and competition. Scientists are the most competitive human beings our species ever produced, and that is what really gets the denialists, if you point that out. Because they love this image that the scientists are little lemmings follow each other around, when they are instead walking down Main Street looking for some paradigm to destroy. It is the positive-sum game that our protectors, we are not threatened by what they can see. We are threatened by what they can do. We cannot control what they can see if we can't see them. But in a generally transparent environment, we can see them, and if they start to snarl at us, we can yank. Our ability to see is more important than the illusion that we might blind them by 10%. In 2003, just 2 years after 9/11, Blue America was ready for a reevaluation of the Patriot Act. Why? Because John Poindexter was discovered creating TIA, that's right, total information awareness. 10 points. It was just 10 years ago. Total information awareness. In Blue America, there was a huge furor over it. It was a scandal. Poindexter got fired. DARPA's information budget was temporarily zeroed out. And we were told total information awareness went away. Where did it go? 3 letters. NSA. If we ban it from the NSA, where do you think it'll go? Someplace secreter. Someplace darker. Someplace harder to find. Until they eventually, one scandal after another, oh yes, this time pinky swear, it's gone. Finally, it'll come a point where the whack-a-mole game will end. Do you know that they are on the verge of discovering useful, real lie detectors? Brain mapping is on the eye tracking, as I described in my first novel, Sundiver, back in 1980. Eye tracking is proving to be a window to the soul. You combine that with surveillance, big data, and the Moore's law of cameras, and what do you have? You have the ingredients either for Big Brother forever, because how are you going to have a revolutionary movement under those circumstances? Or Big Brother never. And what boggles me is we all can see that this could become Big Brother. I mean, the big difference between a decent, sane Democrat and a decent, sane Republican, please no snarks about the fraction of each that are in that category. But you know what the biggest difference is? We've all been raised on mythologies of suspicion of authority. The most effective self-preventing prophecy science fiction novel of all time was obviously 1984. The difference is which direction you see Big Brother coming from. Whether it's snooty academics and faceless government bureaucrats, or conniving aristocrats and faceless corporations. And the biggest reason why we can't talk to each other anymore, because the obvious answer to that is, well, duh! It could come from any of those directions. And this fused spine disease that we have now, where you could only look at the proto-Big Brothers in one direction. A political chiropractor for this country would do us a lot of good. I'm more afraid of these guys, but I confess it's possible. I suppose it's possible. You guard them, I'll guard you. Just about the only guy doing that today is Jon Stewart. The point is that reciprocal criticism is the only known antidote to error, and it's the only way we're going to get through this. It's the only way that we can get the positive sum game of a skilled and efficient and effective protector caste that obeys and will never be Big Brother. Because what we never hear from right or left in their wailings about Big Brother and how this technology and that technology is going to cause Big Brother is no one ever talks about how this might, if we adapt to these technologies properly, result in Big Brother never. And it can. If we all can use the cameras, if we all have access to the databases, if we can apply lie detectors to all our politicians, if we have the guts to have a moderate capitalism reset the way both Roosevelts did, God, where's the next Roosevelt? Then it's possible we might bridge this dangerous time. Now I'm going to show you a slide here. Every single generation since the 15th century has seen major changes in the human ability to see and know and pay attention and reach. Printing vastly augmented memory, glass lenses augmented vision, perspective augmented our ability to pay attention. Art can affect our ability to think. And always in each of these cases, it resulted in crises. Always there were grouches who said, human beings can't handle this. We need to control these things, or it will drive normal people crazy. And every time there were transcendentalists who said, this is going to make everybody better, who was always right in the short term? The grouches. Printing presses, their immediate effect was to exacerbate religious wars in Europe horribly. When loudspeakers and radio arrived in the 1930s, the principal result was that gifted polemicists transfixed and hypnotized mass populations. And the chief difference in the English-speaking world was that somehow our master polemicists were on our side. Churchill, Roosevelt. Now, that may not have been a coincidence. It may be that, we chose among the master polemicists, and we chose, a couple who happened to be on our side. But nevertheless, you pass through a phase in which these are very, very dangerous. But in each of these cases, do we regret these things now? The massive expansions of education and ability on the part of citizens to know what's going on is continuing. In every case, expansions of knowledge, attention, and reach led to fear of self-destruction and hubris, and calls for renunciation. I depict this going on in the 2040s in my novel Existence. But we never turn them down, and godlike powers become the norm. Well, you saw this aphorism before. One thing that I wanted to mention to you here is one thing that's harming our ability to do discourse is how utterly wretched things are online. How incredibly lobotomizing things are with 140 characters or ROFL or it's just it's as if every single choice that could lobotomize, and that's not meaning that everything has to be erudite. But for heaven's sake, can't there be some methods that enhance our ability to engage in serious discussion? Well, I often show this slide back east, and that is, what was the real lesson of 9/11? The real lesson of 9/11 was that citizenship is not over. New Yorkers armed with these fought the fires when the firemen were dead. They organized themselves, and because of these, were able to organize the rebellion aboard United Airlines Flight 93, which in many ways ended the war right that very day, because it proved that citizenship counts in America. The best book about this is by the great Rebecca Solnit. You should read all of her books, but A Paradise Built in Hell is about how our notions spread by Hollywood that our neighbors are all idiots and sheep could not be farther from the truth. And it's an insult to all of us. Unfortunately, these methods of connectivity are seriously hobbled nowadays. The mobile phone network is frail and easily overloaded and truly lousy when we need it most. Net access, same thing with internet access. It's been a scandal for 25 years. One example is what happened in Katrina, Or Fukushima, the fact that people were unable to self-organize because the powers that be almost reflexively repressed self-organization that had worked so well in New York in the 9/11 crisis. The fact is just one thing, one trait that we could have on our phones if they had peer-to-peer text passing capability that only turned on when there's no cell tower within reach. The cell companies could even charge for those text messages. There was a poor woman in Fukushima. They found her corpse months later. She had been buried in one of the buildings. Dozens of outgoing texts stored on her phone. People had been walking by, people had been driving by, but no cell tower had been reestablished until the battery ran out. If somebody walking by could have sucked up her text messages, passed them along. We know how to do this. Qualcomm even wants to do it. It's there in their chipset. But Verizon and AT&T won't do it. And our government is too lockjawed, too paralyzed, some might say deliberately, to require such things. Or the fixing of our power networks. I won't talk about the professionalization of everything, saving professional journalism. In my opinion, another huge missed business opportunity nowadays is systems of micropayments. It's been missing for years. Huge business opportunity. It would not be the same as PayPal because you would have to have a streamlined system, and how to make such a system secure. I think I know how to do that. But the main thing is that if someone were to come up with a profitable and useful system of micropayments, it would save journalism, because people would be willing to pay a nickel for a New York Times article that they spend 10 minutes. What's your time worth? The whole notion that everything has to be free is a truism that's false. You would be willing to pay a nickel to read an article for 10 minutes. You would be willing to pay a nickel for an article that you read for 10 minutes, especially if you don't have to pay until after you're finished. So this is, again, an area, just like the horrible interfaces that I talked about earlier, where there are big opportunities. All right, I don't have time to get any of this. The whole notion that nature, they sang the song, "The Circle of Life." Nature is about competition at one level, becoming cooperation at the ecological level. The world is filled with such things where emergent properties become cooperation. We see this in the development of our very brains, and if you read my novel Earth, I make it fairly easy concept. And this forms our brains. Supposedly, it's how our Enlightenment arenas work, where the dynamic tension, the competitive processes of democracy, science, law courts, and markets, democracy, science, are all competitive and harness human competition so that it doesn't collapse and give it a bad name, which is what usually happens because human beings cheat. And if you don't think so, try reading Lord of the Flies. Imagine what would happen if sports teams could choose all the best guys, and have no rules, like in rollerball. There's reasons why sports teams are extremely regulated to keep competition flat and even, and making it not flat is always the agenda of oligarchs. We have a diamond-shaped social structure instead of the pyramidal-shaped social structure, and I talk about that elsewhere, where there's churn within, where who your parents were does not automatically decide what you're going to be and what your destiny is, and where the whole diamond rises. And does it live up to that pure image? Of course not. Does it live up to that image better than any other human generation that ever lived? Of course it does. So the question is, can we save it from slumping into a pyramid? And there's old Adam Smith, and I have an essay online. You could look it up, David Brin, Adam Smith, and it chides liberals for ignoring the greatest jiu-jitsu political opportunity that has ever been presented to a movement, and that is to reclaim Adam Smith. Because the right has utterly abandoned him. And if liberals were to reclaim this guy, who is not the fellow you think he is, he's also the author of The Theory of Moral Sentiments, and he wanted mass public education in the 18th century. If liberals were to reclaim him, it would be the greatest political jiu-jitsu move. All right, I already mentioned these positive sum games. What would it take for the web to become a fifth arena? Oh, Clay Shirky says, we're all open and we're all arguing with each other. Isn't it wonderful? Have you ever seen a single bad idea on the web die? In markets, bad products die. In democracy, eventually, really bad policies die. Science, bad theories die. Nothing on the internet ever dies. I think I know how we could get that, but... Oy. All right, back to the basic topic here. And I think what I should do now is open it up for questions and discussion, because I've tossed a huge amount out there. One of the young ladies earlier talked about confusing the system. I recommend you read Werner Vinge's novels about the singularity. He's one of my colleagues who also writes science fiction about the near future, exploring where we might be headed. And he has, in one of his novels, what's called the Friends of Privacy, who basically sabotage the internet's usefulness as a source of knowledge in any way, shape, or form by automatically generating tons of crap that isn't true. What I can say about this basic concept of how to stay free is, oh God. We don't need more lies. What we need is the ability to catch those who might harm us. And the analogy I'd like to give you is the restaurant. You go to a restaurant with every expectation of having privacy. You're not going to talk about things that are utter top secret. You're not going to thrash out a major fight with your spouse. But generally, you can talk about things with some major expectation that you're probably going to be left alone and probably nobody's going to learn what you're talking about. Why? It's a public place. Everyone can see each other. Would you have more privacy in a restaurant with paper shoji screens between all of the tables? Well, the wait staff would hate it, but hey, we'll raise the minimum wage. It'll all be robots, dropping stuff down below. Please, I didn't mean it that way. Raise the minimum wage. The point is, which restaurant are you going to have more privacy? You're going to have less privacy in the one with the screens. Why? Because anybody can go up to the screen, punch a little hole, and peek through and listen to your entire conversation. What are you doing at the restaurant most of the time? Every 5 minutes or so, watch next time. You actually take a little glance of situational awareness. And if you catch someone being silent, but it's amazing how good you are at detecting that. If a couple is being silent a table or two away and listening, leaning in and listening, you are really good at detecting that. One glare from you and they leave. Why? Because eavesdropping is socially less acceptable than anything that couple over there might be saying. More embarrassing. It is because the restaurant is open that you have some degree of privacy, because you can catch the voyeurs. Someone is going to, over the course of your life, fly a little mosquito drone into your bedroom. And what is your defense against them watching your sexual habits? Some of your neighbors will be hobbyists and members of organizations where they have the latest techniques or tuning apparatus, and one will knock on your door and say, I think you may have a bug. And they will trace it back to the little pimple-faced voyeur's home and tell his mom. We live today because of mutual assured destruction. Sorry. It saved us from World War III, and it is how it will save some privacy. People will leave each other alone because if they don't, they'll get caught. But you will make it paradise for them if you will make it impossible for us to see. You'll recall that I said that we are heading toward a new world, with the eyeglasses painting the name tags. What do you have in your pocket? You have dozens and dozens of prosthetics for reputation. In the village of old, you would have gone to the blacksmith, made a trade, and he would have shaken hands because you knew each other, and you would bring that bushel of wheat in exchange for the horseshoes. We can know 2,000 to 5,000 people. A very gregarious person can know 5,000 people over the course of a life, because that's the number you would have, max. But we have prosthetics now. The internet. Our brains are going to be prostheticized. You're going to know everybody on a world of 8 billion people. You go to a little shop in Bangkok. They have walking sticks. Some of them can even break into a run. And you tap, click. Your sister with her curio shop in Duluth says, "Ooh, I want a dozen." The shop owner taps, clicks, gets her credit rating, her business thing. You shake hands and walk away because you've both recorded the transaction. What else do you need? The village is coming back. The question we have to face is, will it be the horrible village that 95% of our ancestors lived in? Dominated by the feudal lord on the hill who could take your women and wheat and your sons. Bullied by his thugs and the local priests. And above all, bullied and hounded by the local gossips. Or might it be, do I have a slide for this? Oh yeah, there's the prosthetics. There's the thing. Oh yeah, I was going to do this. Oh, there's that. That's the most important thing. Here's the village of old. Some of you recognize one of those images from the village of the prisoner. Nobody's that old? Oh. Or the village of American mythology, of Andy Hardy movies, where everybody knows everything about everybody else and leaves each other alone, where tolerance is the fetish, where bullying and gossip are in ill repute, and where if that one family is in hard times, sorry, we're not going to leave you alone. Instead, we're going to put on a show. For the terminally shy, they're both horrors. And I'm sorry about that. Maybe we'll develop better drugs. Because even if my prescription keeps us free and allows us the reciprocal accountability that makes our neighbors leave us alone and makes the big businesses pay us a share, an interest in our information without the delusion that we can control our information. But that what they use it for is open to inspection, and I can catch them if they misuse it. Even if we have all of that, and it's Big Brother never, the coming world is not a nice place for the shy. As a matter of fact, Big Brother is a nice place for the shy, because it won't be a boot heel in the face. It'll be much more like Brave New World, much more like Huxley, because they don't dare to make us mad. Instead, they'll drug us and fool us into thinking we're still in charge. So, villains have to behave, and one of the basic things that we can do to keep the villains under control is by reducing the number of their minions. Yes, the basic answer that everybody says to the Transparent Society is, it's uneven. The mighty will have more power to use the information than the average person. And we just saw a counterexample right here on this stage. The Electronic Frontier Foundation gets my money every year. And among thousands of members, they chip in and they are able then to hire skilled professional lawyers and technals. The ACLU can do that. It's a model for how we add to the old techniques of dividing the mighty and sicking them against each other and all the other techniques. We now have the non-governmental organizational technique. And if ACLU and EFF had 10 times as many members and 100 times the budget, would you then be able to say, well, people don't have equivalent power? Of course you could. But we inch away at it. And one thing we do under those circumstances, if we have a transparent enough society, that won't end all conspiracies, but it will limit the number of henchmen that they have if we have good whistleblower laws. As the NSA found, much to their chagrin, that having 250,000 henchmen may have been charmingly naive on their part. Well, that's what we're trying to aim for, and I thank you, and I open it up for throwing things. Have at. Hold me accountable.
Two questions. How do you respond to the argument from the security apparatus that they need some secrecy to protect us from the Russians, the Chinese, Robert Mugabe, whoever the villain of the moment happens to be? And also, is this just a pipe dream, or is this something that could actually be implemented in today's political environment?
Well, you said a mouthful there. First off, it's not a pipe dream because you are standing here today in the freest society that ever existed. Oh, maybe not compared to Iceland. I'm including Iceland, in this society. Therefore, something must have worked. Now, I'm not saying it worked perfectly, but every generation has expanded the circles of rights. Some at great cost, in the Civil War. Some at great personal cost, Martin Luther King. But are you denying that we live in a world in which we have made big steps? So, if we have, then the question is it under threat? It's always under threat. Every generation has had to do resets of capitalism, for example. And the problem with ours is that it was 70 years delayed because the last reset worked so well. That the entire boomer generation has gone through its entire life under this blithe assumption that there's no such thing as class war when 6,000 years says otherwise in every other culture. And we're having to learn the hard way that it always comes back. And it's always a challenge. But they are making their move now, an oligarchic push. Why? Why now? I talk about this in existence. Because they know if they don't take over in the next 20 years, it'll be Star Trek forever. It's a very critical time. Now, I don't know if I answered your question. The simple fact of the matter is that our professional protector caste, if you do not know any military officers, if you do not know any of the civil servants who work for these agencies, it's a damn shame. Because I know quite a few of them. And every single, not every single one. All but a couple who I've met are truly sincere, religion level dedicated. Especially the military officers, except for a couple in the Air Force. Woo! religion level dedicated to obeying civilian rule. The question is, can we rely on that? Of course not. We have to be the people who hold the choke chain. I don't care if they need tactical secrets to do their job. What bothers me is avoidance of accountability. And what bothers me most is that the argument is not parsed in those terms. When was the last time you heard it parsed in those terms? Secrets should be temporary, and if there is a need for tactical secrecy, it should be supervised by agents of the people. The one step that was made is they're going to introduce an ombudsman to the NSA court. If you know anything about human history, it's real easy to suborn these things. EFF should have its own ombudsman on the FSA court, on the FISA court. Now, it should be somebody who has a full security clearance. EFF would not get their first 20 choices. But if EFF has one, if ACLU has one, then it becomes a real court. It's adversarial. My big suggestion is to take every single government agency has an inspector general who's supposed to make sure they're obeying the law and following procedures properly. And they're usually appointed by the person they're supposed to inspect. And that is insane. I'm on record as proposing IGUS, I-G-U-S, the Inspector General of the United States, a military type uniformed service like the Public Health Service. Did you know that? NOAA and the Public Health Service. That's why the Surgeon General is a general. The Inspector General of the United States, separate from the executive. And you take all of the inspectors general from all the departments, and they now work for her. In a one-page law, we would gain a good 7, 8, 9% increase in our trust in our government. Notice how I said that. That wouldn't satisfy me. I'm as terrified of Big Brother as any of you. I am as militant as any of you. And those who say, David Brin says, oh, forget about privacy and trust the government. Bullshit. I am more terrified of Big Brother from every direction because I can turn my freaking head. But I know what works. What got us here is us being ferociously, militantly knowing citizens. And it's not, don't look at me, without ever saying how. How are you going to stop them from looking? Even if you come up with a way to stop them from looking at you, you'll need transparency in order to verify it. What I'm recommending has to come first. And only then can you blind the watchdog. Do I get carried? You're getting a little bit of a show here. Someone else. All right, well, you know, some of you have heard this before. I'm told it's an interesting book. At least it has an interesting page 206. I'll hang around in any event. There's not something right after this, is there? No. This is it? This is it. Okay, so I'll hang around a little while. And thanks a lot. Good. Oh, wait, we have a question.
Sorry, David, there's no measure of your voice. Certainly it's great theater up there. I asked the question before about who owns our future, and you've answered it, actually, here. But getting back to the whole thing about the graph, okay? If you look, you can turn your neck better than anybody else. And if you look both directions, you see that our future is a massive collection of graphs, not so much our data, but really the direction that we're headed. Those that are tracking us to see what movements we're making, as it were. So if you're turning your neck both ways, how are we, let's say us folks that are on the ground, to avail ourselves and know what our graphs look like? It's not being shared with us then.
You're absolutely right. This is what the proto-oligarchs, this is what the proto-masters of the universe want. And that is for the flow of light to not be reciprocal. And I get so busy berating a lot of you for obsessing on the wrong sub-portions of this problem that I might give you the impression that I am not militant about the same overall problem as you. And that's wrong. I think it's horrific that our information could be used against us by insurance companies. And this actually was probably the biggest undiscussed benefit of Obamacare, was that your pre-existing conditions, that your search history of looking up something could have resulted in you suddenly losing your insurance policy for no reason that you're aware of, just because of your searches. And that seems less likely now. The thing we need to do is make your freedom less potentially harmful to you. Pragmatically, step by step by step. And the second thing is to create and engender a habit of demanding that the mighty strip naked. And mind you, there is already a sliding scale. Probably most of you in this audience, if all of your private information were put online, not me, and not a few people in this room, but most of you, if your private information got out online, you would be able to sue for invasion of privacy. I'm a public figure, so I would have to sue for actual damages. But this is a very interesting piece of law. Already in both common law and in explicit law, there are sliding scales that are supposed to protect the meek more than elites. We need more of these. But my emphasis is not on protecting the information of the poor and the meek, because you're just not going to do that. Oh, sure. Now, mind you, I consult in Europe a lot, and the Europeans are way ahead of us on some of these privacy laws and on the control of the flow of information. They love bureaucracy, and they're very short term, they're ahead of us on this, and there are things you can do. Okay. But over the long run, as we've seen from Heartbleed and Target and all of that sort of thing, this stuff's gonna come out. And the only way you can prevent it from truly harming us is the opposite radicalism. And that is that the heads of the insurance companies, the heads of the major corporations, the Wall Street wizards, government officials, they've got to recognize that if you want the power, you're going to have to lose some weight because you're going to be in Speedo. You're going to be wearing Speedos and under our scrutiny the whole time. Isn't that really our basic reflex? I mean, isn't that what we instinctively as Americans and Westerners feel things ought to be? If you want to be powerful, strip. And that's the radicalism that truly makes sense. And I don't know if I answered your question, but something someone else said on the panel beforehand was very interesting about how our children are going to adapt. Damn straight, but they're already doing it. There's been a lot of talk about why the kids expose themselves so much online. And of course, if they expose themselves in really grotesque ways, they're idiots. Without prefrontal lobes, without thinking in the future. And unfortunately, the prefrontal lobes, even for smart kids, really they're the last thing we recapitulate, They really only finish kicking in around age 25, 26. You can guess the age of my kids. But in fact, most of the kids are putting on mildly embarrassing things. Now, what are they doing? Are they being stupid? Or are they committing themselves and wagering upon a future civilization in which that kind of crap doesn't matter? In which minor embarrassments that didn't hurt anybody when you were 17 don't mean squat. In which Clinton said, "I didn't inhale." Obama said, "Sure, it was quite a buzz. I got over it." Did I say Clinton twice? I meant Obama the second time. Did I say Obama? You did. Oh, okay. Woo! Do you see my point? It's more important that we create a world whose social values say, leave each other alone, and the only thing that sticks with you is deliberately harming people. And the interesting thing is, I'm not being utopian when I say that. What is it that determines whether, when you find out more about a previously cryptic group in society, whether the tolerance of that group increases or decreases? The more we learn about skinheads and racists and KKK, the less they are tolerated. But name the group. The more we learn about gays, the more we learn about gays, the more they're tolerated. Except for those fringe skinhead harmful gays with the bad, never mind, I was going to make some joke about metrosexuals. A very tolerant joke, but teasing, and I didn't think it went anywhere. The point is that the fundamental thing we're already doing is that the criterion of whether or not exposure results in disdain is really the criterion of hate. Now, is this true across the board? Do we do it perfectly? Are there large swathes of America for whom that's not true? Yada, yada, yada. Fine. The point is that in a general sense, the direction we need to go is the direction that we've been going. Anybody else? Yeah, all right, well.
Hi, David. I think this might be an oversimplification, but I think overall what I understand you're saying could be in the framework of this notion of artificial intelligence, robotics, and how computers can learn faster than humans and maybe even be superior, versus what Doug Engelbart believed in was human augmented intelligence. And it seems like, I think less of that is happening now. For example, when you mentioned about peer-to-peer communications on cell phones without towers, that's a technology that was available. In fact, it was approved by the FCC February 14th, 2002. It was ultra-wideband. It was peer-to-peer communications.
Cell codes refused to implement it.
Right, because it's a matter of control. And they, like you said, they don't want self-organization or this human augmented intelligence that we're manipulated by socially through fear. And I think our world is going more towards artificial intelligence, where we have less control?
Well, the artificial intelligence is a whole nother area. There are 6 general approaches to creating artificial intelligence. The most optimistic one is almost never discussed, although you can see it portrayed in my novel Existence. I've gone online, you can look it up, David Brin and Terminator, the word Terminator.
Yeah.
And I think the most dangerous of them all, thank heavens for author Lewis, what's his first name? Flash Mobs, whatever, the recent book. But the one about high frequency trading. And more money is being spent on artificial intelligence by Goldman Sachs than by the top 10 universities. And it's all being spent on AI systems that are predatory, parasitical, ruthless, rapacious. And it's all being done in secret. That is a hell of a combination. So, if you are afraid of Skynet, it ain't coming out of the military. They like off switches. But it could easily come out of high frequency stock trading. I don't know, in general, human augmentation is one of many science fiction scenarios that could be extremely scary or extremely fantastic. We could certainly use more intelligence. There are so many such technologies. One of the creepiest of all came out just last week. This one laboratory, they co-joined a young and an old mouse. They did it a number of times so that they could verify it. It's verified, all right. Co-joined them, meaning they joined their blood supplies. They made them Siamese mice. And the older one got younger and the younger one got older. I mean, talk about absolutely pure, cheap sci-fi. Yeah. I mean, it writes itself. And what are you going to do in such a world where it is so easy to kidnap 300 fresh young girls somewhere? There's an ironic twist on another piece of news.
Wow. And
co-join them to some old fart and he gets younger? Well, they age. This is a world we could have. And what is the only thing that could stop that world? It is this. That world, that way of behavior, is lethally allergic to light. And the thing about our protector caste, about our society, is it's not. Light is inconvenient. Light can be irksome. It can occasionally be politically lethal to a leader now and then. But Snowden and Assange were very surprised when they revealed all this stuff and people said, we got to discuss this in general. And when they looked at the specifics of what they revealed, the specifics were, okay, there's that. That's pretty bad. And there's that. The rest of it's kind of a little bit embarrassing. Almost nothing illegal was revealed by either Assange or Snowden. Now, did Snowden, who is by far the most effective of the two, and who might actually be a villain, did what he revealed have a salutary effect upon our national discussion over what should be illegal? Absolutely. Absolutely. And on that basis, I'm glad it happened. He probably did a lot more good than he intended. But the fact is that the year after Assange revealed 250,000 State Department documents, Hillary Clinton would have kissed him on the mouth if she could have done it in secret. Do you know why?
No.
Because among those 250,000 State Department documents were dozens and dozens that illustrated United States diplomats despising Mubarak and despising the Bin Ali in Tunisia and the dictators they had to work with. proving the very opposite of the rumor in the bazaar that we were lying about wanting them to get better and actually supporting them. And as a result, during the 18 months of the Arab Spring, not one American flag was burned. Then you got Benghazi. But that was Al-Qaeda. That was not Democrats in the street. Things are ironic. And if you keep yourself with a fused spine, interpreting things only in the glasses of your narrative, you're going to miss stuff like that. Whereas, in fact, it's all so much more interesting if you can spot the ironies. The irony that we desperately need better whistleblower laws, even though Assange and Snowden probably would not classify, because they didn't blow a whistle on anything illegal. Weird.
Yeah.
But we have to develop a taste for weird. I don't know if I answered your question.
Sort of, yeah.
Unfortunately, I can't argue with you because I agree with everything pretty much that you said, but I'll ask you a question about the future. Even if all those arenas that you mentioned, the market, the government, the laws, and the web, are going to become just software, basically. Everything's going to be digital or is going in that direction. So what do you think about open source? Can you have reciprocal accountability without having open source?
Well, open source is a fantastic archetype for how we cannot discover our own mistakes, but we discover each other's mistakes. And it is proved to be just about the only way we're going to move ahead into the next world without bugs eating us to death. Does this mean that I think all things have to be open source? I have software patents. I would not be a troll about them. I'm irritated about how little attention they've gotten. I think I could solve one of those slides of the really bad interface. But, look, I'm all in favor of the general notion of the emancipated community of young Cory Doctorow people out there doing the maker culture and all of that. I write about it myself. As a matter of fact, I think I'll donate to the crew a comic book that I did about that. But the solution is going to also be to repair the old arenas. We can't do without them yet. Why is our civilization so complicated with so many rules? It's because we're Cro-Magnons. We're barely out of the cave. We do not know how to be parents. We do not know how to run a sane and just civilization that's fair to everybody. And we are dreamers who believe that we can be good parents and can be citizens of a fantastic, fair, open, and just civilization that is fair to everyone. And there are many people on this planet, especially in the East, and of course in the macho belts, and especially in the macho belt that has been giving us trouble lately, who think that we're insane, that no such thing could be done. If we're insane, it is a divine madness that flowered briefly in Periclean Athens and had little glimmers occasionally in Republican Rome and Republican Florence and Venice and in Iceland and a few other places. The diamond-shaped social structure, the belief in the common citizen, the belief that ideas are not inherently toxic, but you can raise children capable of dealing with all ideas and choosing the best and eliminating the dross. These are all concepts that are considered mad in the context of 6,000 years and 99% of human cultures and large fractions, including many of our fellow citizens, who are renunciating science and turning away from the future that it's offering them. And I don't know. I don't know. I cannot prove that it's not insane. Plato thought it was insane when he helped to crush the Periclean experiment. All I know is that I sat next to Jill Tarter last night and we discussed contact at an event down in San Diego. I'm involved in the search for extraterrestrial intelligence. Is that it's pretty damn empty out there. And if 99% of human cultures were shaped like a pyramid, with a few lording it over masses below and using their priests to repress the free and open exchange of ideas, then maybe that's the case, that attractor state, that Darwinian rewarded attractor state, because we're all descended from the harems of the guys who pulled that off, that maybe that attractor state is one of the things that yanked all the other species out there into becoming silent. Either too conservative to go out into the stars, or too mistake-prone to survive. And you look at the fantastic things that we've done with this diamond-shaped social structure and with these methods of getting in each other's faces and finding each other's mistakes. And it may be crazy. You may be right, I say to these people. We may be crazy. But it just may be a lunatic we're looking for. Turn out the lights? Oh, don't say maybe. Come on. You may be wrong, for all I know, but you may be right.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you all for attending in person, and thanks for those watching the webcast and for those that will watch the on-demand videos in the future. Good night.